Good evening readers, it's Tilly here from Tilly's Shelf. This is a retrospectively filmed introduction to the second part of my video on the sonnets. So it turned out to be way too long because I filmed it as I was and am quite tired, and I had to divide it into two parts because there was over an hour of footage, which I have edited down, I promise. This video is going to focus on the overall themes of the sonnets and why I, as a 21st century young woman in a society that has very different expectations of loving relationships and gender roles, find some difficulties with admiring the sonnets as they were supposed to be admired. So now on to talking about the sonnets in general. I really hoped that I would really like these. I've read a couple of them before and not really liked them, but I thought it was because I was reading them in that big book and it was an uncomfortable experience, and I thought I just maybe didn't get it very well because of the language, the difficult Shakespearean language. But I know now that I can normally watch a Shakespeare play and I get what's going on, and I get that all of the speeches, like I'm rarely at a loss for what's going on. I read Julius Caesar as well for ShakeTube. I didn't enjoy that very much, so maybe I just sort of benefit from seeing his work performed rather than reading it to myself. But I did have some problems with the sonnets. So Mark was talking, and a lot of people were talking, and a lot of people do talk in general about seeing Shakespeare in these poems and kind of tracing his relationships in these poems, and the dark lady and the young man and all of that, and people kind of try and play the detective and try to deduce Shakespeare's character from his poetical works in a way that they don't really do with his plays. But people really think that from the sonnets we can kind of work out who Shakespeare was and what he was doing. It will always be enigmatic, but people do try to analyse them in that way. And to me, if we're to take these poems as evidence of Shakespeare's character, the impression that I get is not a good one. So his work reminds me of recent male pop stars. So one that immediately sprang to mind was, I don't know the name, but it came out in the last couple of years, and one of the lines in the chorus is, "You say I'm crazy because you don't think I know what you've done, but when you call me baby, I know I'm not the only one." So it's supposedly this passionate, romantic love ballad from this heartbroken man who's like, I love you so much, but you have broken my heart and you are cheating on me. And actually it reeks of jealousy and misogyny with overtures of control and emotional manipulation, and it's just generally not very good. And I got some of those vibes from some of the sonnets. And equally, there is another recent pop song. I could think of quite a few examples, but I'm going to stick to the two, which talks about being in love with the shape of you. Not you, the shape of you. Your outward appearance. And that is also a very, very strong vibe that I get from the sonnets. And I know, it is Petrarchan poetry, isn't it? The sonnet form, it's all about, romantic speeches to this unattainable love and comparing her to all of these beautiful natural images and just being really, like, oh, I love you so much and you're so unattainable and you look so gorgeous and oh, the sunshine and moonlight and red lips and rosy cheeks and blah, 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 blah. That is what Petrarchan poetry is, but it can be done differently, and it can be done in a way that at least conveys some kind of emotional connection to the lover that is not purely based on either lust or beauty or the desire to control. And that's what I get from Sonnet 29, is the idea that the lover in that poem provides some emotional support. So you get the idea that there is this kind of supportive relationship going on there. You would hope it might be a little bit one way, but something is there. That is what I like about, for example, another one that I like is Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day? That one, because it uses words like temperate and so on that don't seem to specifically refer entirely to appearance, it does seem to have something more of a warm, loving kind of sense to it. Romantic poem that is loving, that is nice. But otherwise, a lot of the time, the mistress or the lover, the kind of the target of these poems is presented as being, cruel or false or, any internal characteristics apart from beautiful exterior. The inside is generally suggested to be nasty. And I don't think that is a reflection on the subject, I think that's a reflection on the poet. I know the ones that I like Shall I Compare Thee to a Summer's Day? It is perhaps a little bit too cute, too lovely, but I like lovely. You know, if you're going to give me a romantic poem, I want it to be romantic and I want it to be as cute as possible, and that's what I want. And I know maybe he was going for some more complex themes in his other ones, but I just found them really unwholesome. It's a very unhealthy view of love. And in fact, he does use metaphors of disease multiple times. Sonnet 147, My Love is a Fever, talks a lot about, you know, love being bad and, you know, destructive and unpleasant. It reminds me of almost Wuthering Heights and that, like, romance is the wrong word, but human relationships as a conflict about power and desire more than about, you know, mutual support and comfort. What else? There's also, like, the spectre of death lurches through these poems, accompanied by time's decay. So I'm talking about the poems that Mark set for his abridged version of the sonnets, rather than the poems as a whole, because I haven't read them all. But in the ones that I read, death and time's decay recur again and again. And also themes of the endurance of poetry and how what the poet is writing is going to last beyond the people that he's writing about. So I perceive this at times to be almost quite threatening, like in Sonnet 12, when it's like the waves breaking on the shore, and then it goes on to talk about, you know, everything being destroyed by time. I kind of see that as like a bit of a threat, you know, like your time is short and you're getting old. There's another one, which might be 104, I'm going to say, where he says, oh, you know, you don't look old to me because I love you. That my feeling from that was he was kind of also saying, but you are getting old. Like, watch out. You've aged 3 years. You're getting old. In quite an unpleasant, like, I don't think you're getting ugly, but you probably are. It wasn't nice. It wasn't like saying that being old isn't also beautiful. It was saying, you know, youth is perfection and you're not perfect anymore. And Sonnet 116, rosy lips and cheeks within his bending sickle's compass come. It's quite, I just see a lot of these references as threatening. That is vividly threatening. You know, death's going to come and slice you down, because you're going to be old and ugly, and your lover's going to peter out. And I feel like the references to how his writing will endure, they just came across to me as being quite arrogant and cocky and like, oh yeah, I'm writing this down and this paper's going to last for longer than we are. I don't know. I just found that I was expecting a much more mature and nuanced approach to love and to his craft and to relationships. I even wrote in my essay about Sonnet 116, I even wrote about this kind of mature and nuanced approach to love without it actually being in the poem. Like, when I reread the poem now and I read what I wrote about it, it's like I was making it up, because I don't see that depth there. What I see is somebody trying to show himself as clever, which is what Petrarchan poetry was about proving that you could play with words and play with metaphors and play with form and get away with it. But it is very lacking in depth. Most of the time, it's very, very lacking in depth, and it's so frustrating. Maybe it's just me not being able to crack the poems open and see the depth. And maybe it's just that he was writing what people wanted to read, and people maybe liked these kind of memento mori moments in the poems and liked the kind of visual metaphors of appearance, but I didn't like it. I don't have any more coherent way of saying that. I just didn't like most of this. And there's lots of kind of slightly misogynistic lines, like in Sonnet 20. I think Mark was talking about this a little bit when he's saying, oh, you know, in the line, shifting changes as is false woman's fashion. Sonnet 130, which is talking about how his mistress isn't particularly beautiful, but he still loves her a lot. He doesn't say, my mistress is a nice person and I love her a lot. He says, my mistress is pretty ugly, but I love her. Or, for example, Sonnet 80, which is all about bonds and possession, and he says that he's kind of valiantly relinquishing her, but what I get from that is that he is either discarding her or he is manipulating her. He is kind of saying, oh, you know, I will give you up because I am the bigger man, and making her heart not her own, and making this woman who is the target of his romantic gestures trying to take away her agency and trying to control her, particularly with all of that talk about bonds and you know, giving herself up and kind of letting herself be enchained by love. Or Sonnet 145, which has got this line, I hate, not you. I'm assuming that you know some of these. Maybe I'll put them all up on the wall as I go and you can pause them and read them. His mistress says the words I hate and he's like, oh my god, she hates me, it's awful. And then at the end she adds the two words, not you. And it's a nice authorial twist. It's again needing to show that you are clever. But it's also like he has manipulated her. It actually says... Sorry about that, my phone ran out of space, so I can't actually remember where I was because it took like half an hour to download the files from it. So I think I was talking about sonnet, is it sonnet 80? Maybe it was, no, it wasn't sonnet 80. Good start. Oh, so I was talking about sonnet 145, which is a weird sonnet. It's again, it plays around with the form a little bit. It doesn't really obey iambic pentameter. Those lips that love's own hand did make breathed forth the sound that said, I hate. He says that the woman actually changes what she says in response to his woeful state and grants him mercy. And it's presented as her being like this kind and caring woman, but what I see is Shakespeare not being able to accept a woman saying no, and actually making her say, okay, I don't hate you. Uncomfortable feelings emerge from this. And he's like, oh, she saved my life by saying not you. And I can't like this idea of him being the kind of person who is threatening, really threatening, oh, you know, if you don't love me, I'm gonna go and kill myself. Threats to harm oneself and threats to even kill oneself are used as part of emotional manipulation in order to prevent a woman from leaving, or prevent a person from leaving a situation of domestic abuse, in that person is made to feel guilty and made to feel responsibility for the well-being of the person who is manipulating them and controlling them and trying to stop them from leaving. And I know that in the first half of this video I was talking about this idea of the poet maybe having depression, and you know, you can have depression and still be a perpetrator of domestic abuse, and you know, the mental health issue doesn't excuse the violence and the emotional violence that I see this as being. So I found some big issues there. I also found issues that bothered me in the so-called will poems, 134 and 135. So now I have confessed that he is thine, and whoever hath her wish, thou hast thy will. And these are just like really the height of jealousy to me, and also the height of incomprehensibility. Like, I really didn't really get what was going on in these poems, but what I did get was that he's calling the object of his love a usurer, and saying that she has separated him from his friend, and saying that she is imprisoning his friend, and saying that she is covetous, and that she has imprisoned him as well, in Sonnet 134 and in Sonnet 135, saying that she's got, you know, everything, she's got will and overplus, and saying, oh, why can't you give me anything, and really sort of demanding things from her. And this makes me quite angry. His sense of entitlement, like, oh, you know, have you got no fair acceptance to shine on me, you know, like, I'm good enough, I should get your love. And not giving this woman the choice, and not even giving her the option of saying, actually, you're both a pair of pathetic little shits. I don't want either of you. Excuse my language. I'm getting quite emotional here. I've reached the other side of tired. I've reached the energetic and angry side of tired now, in the time that it took those files to download. So does this matter? Does it matter that the poet that we value most in our society, definitely, the poet that we, you know, we call him the bard, like he's the only bard there ever was. We still teach his poems in school. I remember being taught Sonnet 130 and it being like, oh, isn't it nice the way that he's saying that women don't have to be beautiful? Like, that's some kind of genius revelation that nobody else ever could have thought of. Does it matter that he uses this kind of language? Does it matter that he seems to be, if we're taking his character from these poems, that he seems to be trying to possess the women and the people that he talks about desiring. Yes, it does. Yes, it definitely does. I hope I made that abundantly clear with the rhetorical questions that I just asked. Yes, it matters. And I think it's because we have Shakespeare and we have this great respect for Shakespeare, which I do think that we should accord that respect to his plays, because they are lovely and they do sometimes lack good presentations of gender, but they also sometimes have very interesting presentations of gender that are valuable in the modern day, in a society where we don't see gender as clear cut because of all of the cross-dressing and so on. There's a degree of gender fluidity in Shakespeare's plays that is lacking sometimes in historically in our culture. I do think we should accord Shakespeare that respect for his plays, but for his poems, I think we should be teaching them and delivering them with a pinch of salt, and not just saying, oh, you know, he was of his time, but saying, this is why what he says is not okay, this is why we have changed our views on what he says, but we can look at this nice metaphor and praise the poesy of this line, but also we can criticise and we can use this as a starting point for a discussion on why things have changed and why they should change. Because I think it is because we have Shakespeare and we still look up to him so much, and you hear people say that Shakespeare's sonnets are, you know, the most romantic, wonderful sonnets in our language, that we have people like, I'm sorry to be dishing out the criticism on male pop singers, but really that we have people like Ed Sheeran, Sam Smith. I don't really listen to like radio music, so I don't really know many other names. But we have these situations where you get these songs that are songs about love, but actually they're also about control and lust and desire, and songs that are entirely orientated around appearance, and we just accept that and we still think that these songs are romantic. And you know, we do get popular songs from these singers where they are saying things that are more maybe loving, that they're saying, oh, you know, I'll still love you when you're old, and things like that, you know, I hope so. Thank you, that's nice of you to say so. But they can get away with saying all of these not very well balanced things, and because they are backed up by not just Shakespeare, but a whole wealth of English language cultural heritage that presents the man's side, that presents this idea that it's okay to be controlling and to be manipulative and to have a lover as a possession and to prevent her from leaving that relationship. And it just makes me angry, and I didn't know this was going to well up so much, but it just... Sometimes I'm quite good at separating the art from the artist and separating the time from the work. So seeing a work that has got things in it that we would view today as unacceptable and saying, well, I'll bear that in mind, but it was of the time. But today I'm not good at that. Today I'm really cross with Shakespeare for not being better at this, because, you know, he was an educated man. And he was well read, and he had what we know of, he had, as far as we know, he was married, he had children, he related to women in his day-to-day life, is what I'm trying to say. And I know it doesn't work out like that, but if you relate to people of both genders, you should be able to see if you relate to people of all genders in your day-to-day life, you should be able to accord some respect to people of all genders. And if you're not doing that, then you must have your eyes shut somehow to the people around you. And that's not what I see of Shakespeare when I see his plays. I see him as being somebody who really understands the human state, who can get into other characters and understand how they function and understand why they work as they do, including things that relate to their gender. And it's like he's dismissed all of that for the sonnet, and he's just writing as his own very unpleasant self. And I don't like it. This has got a bit impassioned, but I hope I've managed to convey a shred of what I'm meaning, that what Shakespeare did when he used this kind of language in poems that I don't fully understand, so, you know, I might be misinterpreting things, is he paved the road going forward for men throughout the ages that followed him. And, you know, he was himself walking on a road that had been paved for many centuries, but he paved the road going forward even more securely for men to view that kind of relationship and that kind of love as acceptable and even desirable and right to have that kind of relationship with their lovers. And that has a hangover to the present day, and we're still teaching it in schools, and we're still respecting it, and still seeing these as great works, without always having that caveat of saying, but that's not right. Let's look at how he looked at these issues in these poems. But then, you know, on the other hand, it does sometimes annoy me when people are talking about literature and they always harp back onto certain issues within literature, and they won't respect literature without harping back to those issues. And that sometimes happens with gender, when people will focus overly much on gender aspects of a work instead of just appreciating the work as a whole. So maybe I'm doing that, and if I am, I'm sorry. Well, I definitely am doing that. And I'm not very sorry. And I'm just kind of splurging now. So I'm going to stop, and please let me know what you think. Talk to me in the comments. See whether I will reflect on this when I have had more than 10 hours sleep, and see whether I still agree with myself, because I might not. I quite often don't agree with myself anymore. I get quite worked up about things when I lack sleep. You know, I cry, I shout, I do emotional things that I wouldn't otherwise do. The takeaway points from this was that I liked Sonnet 29, that I like where he has a sonnet where he seems to respect the woman or the person, which obviously we think he wrote some poems to men, that he was talking to. I don't understand the poems, I don't know that much about the poems, I have very, very limited study-related knowledge of the poems, and these are just my personal views. So that's the summary there. Even that summary is just not really a summary, is it? So I'm going to wrap it up. I'm very grateful, as I tried to say at the beginning, I can't remember if I've managed to get to the end of that thought. I'm very grateful to the hosts of ShakeTube, because it has been a very, very interesting month. I have watched a lot of the videos, even when I haven't commented or even when I haven't read the work, I have watched some of the videos. And I've really enjoyed that, and I appreciate the work that has gone in by those people into making this. And now I'm really excited for Victober, and today's the 1st of October, and I've already nearly finished the Duke of Zamora, so it's all going well. And I really hope I'm going to get to you with a video about Victorian literature at some point during the month. So without further ado, I can't even remember the words that I normally use to sign off. Happy reading, that's what I normally say. Happy reading, happy Victober. Happy ShakeTube if for last month, and I will speak to you soon. And thank you for watching this absolute pile of crap. Bye!